Hi, everyone. Welcome to journey number 37. Today, I'm joined by Steven Sharpe Jr. For what I think is going to be an amazing conversation and an amazing person. So, Steven, I would just love for you to start off with telling everybody a little bit about yourself. So, where you're from, what you're doing, anything that kind of pops to mind.
Yeah, hi, glad to be on. So I'm Steven Sharpe Jr., as you mentioned. I am based out of Brooklyn, New York. I consider myself a mental health advocate. I am a content creator, and I'm the founder of Nobius Creative Studios, which is the agency that I run with my business partner. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to. And I feel like I do so much as far as like work is concerned, being a freelancer. Like there's just so many different things. Like I've done modeling, I've done like all these other things, but that's the core of what I've been doing.
So cool. And, I want to jump into a lot of that. But, first, and one of my favorite questions to ask people is just, what they were like as a kid. And I think that we carry so much of ourselves from childhood into our adult life. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. Sometimes it's exactly the same. And a lot of times it's right in the middle. But yeah, what kind of kid were you? What was your dream job when you were growing up? Like, what was it like growing up for you?
Wow. Yeah, so as a kid, I was very how should I put this? I liked to know everything. And I was very much a book nerd. I would read tons and tons of things. I remember at some point, like I would read through this thesaurus, or I would read through a dictionary, or I'd just have like a map of the world and just like read the whole thing so I can memorize everything. Um, let me see, I can probably name the things that I wanted to be. I wanted to be a scientist, I wanted to be an astronomer, and then I wanted to be a journalist for a long time, actually. And I was going to go to school for journalism. And I was just like, no, that's just not, it's not happening. Let's see, what else did I want to be? I think that's about it. Um, but as far as who I am now, I think now that I think about it, it makes sense that, I'm still, that I'm doing what I'm doing, and that, the things that I learned and the things I absorbed through reading and through just experiencing the world. And like, I was also like a really quiet kid, and I was just watch and I felt like I learned so much just watching people, seeing how they interact, seeing like the little things that people wouldn't, if they were having this conversation, that other person would never notice. And I feel like I carry that a lot into my day-to-day life. Like I have a very acute attention to detail, and I can pick up on certain things that are either overlooked, or as far as like a vibe is concerned. Like in the creative world, we always talk about like this vibe, this energy, and like the creative, for me it's like a creative equilibrium. I can figure out like what is off and how to like make that, and how to make it more succinct. um yeah, I mean, what about you? What were you like as a kid?
Uh, it's interesting because I very much so was quiet as well. I was extremely quiet, and
Hmm.
same sort of thing where I think, who knows if it's kind of the chicken or the egg, and I don't know, if because I was quiet, I watched people a lot more closely, or the other way around. But I was very curious, was a big one for me. And I was extremely, extremely curious about everything. I wanted to learn everything. And, it's funny you talking about reading the dictionary and the thesaurus. Like when I was young, I remember reading like history books, and
Oh
specifically like
yeah.
I loved, war. Like we would just call it war. And so I'd read about like the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, and about like, their armies and
Yeah.
different weapons that they carried. And it was just like a book like that. Right. But I just
Yes.
loved it. And it's funny, and I'm curious if you know where that came from for you, because I know for sure it came from my father, where he
Mm.
loved, like, war history, and all of those were his books that he gave me to read. And he loved space, and I couldn't get enough of space. And I tell the story a lot of, when at a very, very young age, I had the 1, 2, 3s, the ABCs, and then I had the planets that I learned in order as well.
Yeah.
Still recite them to this day. And that was just a part of my childhood. And picking up on some of his interests, and really led me to diving deep into them and learning about them. And they became my interests. And, a lot of them have stuck with me today to different levels, but they're still with me. And I think they laid a foundation for me. And so I'm curious, was there anyone in your family that you think you learned that behavior from, or was that kind of on your own, of just being curious about reading, and specifically, call it things that children don't typically read?
Yeah. I can't think of it from coming from a specific source. I think I really just kind of picked up. I'm even just going back to my earliest memories, and I'm like, I don't think there was a time where like I wasn't doing those things. I wasn't very curious about the world. Um, like one could even say like, oh, like I felt trapped in my environment, but I was a kid. I didn't know what exactly, I had no idea about the world. All I knew was the world through, the books that I read. And yeah, and like being in school and like, getting good grades in school. Like I wanted to I wanted to be like a good student. I wanted to, do my job. I wanted to be really smart. Like I found that um, people thought that was really impressive. And that, it was really cool to impress like people who were older than me. I felt like that really gave me a lot of validation. Um, so yeah, I felt like I always ended up being a lot more mature when I was a kid. Just I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling on, like, because I'm like, it's not often that it's not often that anyone asks about that, because I feel like sometimes asking about childhood can be a bit of a minefield. Like, oh boy, what are we gonna get with this one?
That's me just wading into the deep water right off the bat. But I
Yes.
think something else interesting that you brought up is when you're talking about, the ability to go into a creative environment and look at something and be able to pick out, what's off about it, what needs to be changed, or how specifically it needs to look, which is an incredible skill that I don't think a lot of people have. Um, and I relate for myself in my empathy and my emotional intelligence. And
Yeah.
I've always been able to kind of understand people, see where they're coming from, and understand their feelings and why they're feeling that way. And my question to you is just, I don't even know if you've ever thought about it, but how much of that do you think was natural ability of being able to kind of pick that out? Have you always been good at it? Has that kind of always, it's just come easy to you? And how much of it have you had to work on? And like put the effort into, was it, for me, I definitely think it's a lot of both. Of I was always empathetic, emotionally intelligent. However, especially in my childhood growing up, it was I kind of played the mediator role in my family. And so this is a very deep answer, which yours doesn't necessarily have to be, but but playing the mediator role in my family, needing to understand, the feelings of my sister and my parents, and seeing who I needed to show up as I've looked back on it, lots of hard times, lots of, call it traumas in there. However, looking at it now as a man growing up, I call it my superpower, because it allowed me to hone those skills, and now I'm able to apply them in every aspect of my life. And so I'm curious just on that, how much of it was kind of natural talent and how much of it was working on it, or even maybe environment.
I feel like it's a little bit of both. And I feel like, and kind of like how you were saying about your empathy, like have always considered myself a very empathic person
Mhm.
or empathetic person. There in certain aspects, in certain environments, like, I'd be able to feel other people's emotions. And that sounds like very like very marble character, but it's how I felt. And like I could literally pick out and like understand like if someone was, you know, feeling a certain way and be able to like empathize with them. And I think it ties into being able to detect detect a creative environment. And you know, it's all about a look and a feel, and it's all about, you know, creating an experience. And in that experience, like it's, you know, emotion is tied to our experiences. So I feel like it helps, and it's something that, you know, I'm better at it today than I was yesterday. The more like with any craft, the more you use it and the more you work at it, the better you'll be. So yeah, so I feel like at some point, like natural ability only takes you so far. But at some point, like you really, at least for me, I had to not just rely on natural talent and be able to like expand into, you know, really stretch myself and really put myself in environments where I would be challenged, and not just in spaces where I knew that I could, you know, do it like, you know, wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Very cool. No, I love that. And um, you know, one of the other things that I'm really curious about, and it's kind of shifting gears a little bit here, but you know, it sounds like you've done a lot of different things, and they all kind of led you to where you are now. And even, you know, mentioning about how many different, you know, almost silos there are in your professional life. And so are you, I don't know for sure, but you are a full-time essentially influencer. Is that how you would categorize yourself? Or does the marketing agency take up a lot of your time? Or like, how would you categorize yourself first before I get into it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'll always be a content creator, whether, you know, I do consider myself a founder and an entrepreneur, but I feel like the content creator part of me is like the most encompassing part.
Awesome. And so, you know, in that, because especially I think people that are a lot younger, you know, being a quote unquote like influencer content creator is something that a lot of people aspire to be. And, you know, you mentioned modeling, you mentioned a bunch of different things. So I'm really curious how that specifically came about. Like, where did it, you know, did it naturally evolve? Was it kind of one big event where you're like, you know what, I want to do this. This is what I'm going to be doing. Or was it more of a slow build to getting you to that place where, you know, you can kind of say like, yes, I am a content creator?
Um, I say it was a slow build, like in a way that, you know, if you roll a snowball down a hill, like at some point it becomes really big and you have to deal with it. Um, that's kind of how it was for me, where I mean I will say there was a conscious decision to begin to curate my feed, my social media feed, because I saw what other people were doing, other content creators, other influencers at the time doing these things, and to be honest, I felt like I could do it better. So I was like, I'm gonna do this, and I want to get free shit, and I want to go to cool parties. And I had just moved to New York, so I was like, this is the way. Like, I have a great opportunity to show myself off and, you know, produce things that were, in my eyes, better than what I was seeing. And yeah, and then kind of evolved, and you know, realized I was like, oh, like it's happening. Maybe I should do something with this. Understanding that there is an impact to having a community that listens to you.
Mhm.
um and but I do know that there is a very specific point when I realized that this was a job. And it was like around 2019, 2020 that I really started being like, this is an actual job. And, you know, the skills that I bring to the table when I work with my clients, with the brands that I work with, I should be compensated for it. And, you know, I even price things out to figure out like, you know, it'd be a lot more economic for a brand to hire me because I encompass a lot of roles in my job, in this field.
Mhm.
Um, and like I'll make more. I mean, the money that will be paid to me can help sustain my life here as a creator.
Yeah.
Like New York is not cheap. Like, gonna be very real. It's not cheap. So, I have to make the most of the skills that I have, and pricing myself accordingly. And when I started doing that and really having like a boundary of, this is how much I will be paid, I started to really grow. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of a roundabout answer, but
No, it's great.
yeah, it's kind of a whole amalgamation of things.
And, do you remember, was there, because you said, the year, and, even using the snowball analogy of like, it can only roll for so long before you have to deal with it. And do you remember, like, was there a specific point or instance where you're like, oh shit, this is a real job? Or was it more of that mental just decision to more take it quote unquote seriously, or full time? I'm curious on that. Like, do you remember, was there a specific turning point or post or thing that happened in your personal life or whatever it might have been?
I think it was a series of things. I had realized I had realized that I looked in my closet, and now I have like several custom suits. And I realized that the year before I did not have any custom suits. I didn't have any suits at all. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. That doesn't happen that's not a thing that regular people have to deal with. And then there was a moment when I can't remember this exact brand, but there was an event that I went to, and I was just like looking around at the people in the room, and I was in the room with people that I saw, like, who I consider as really powerful and really like influential content creators, influencers. And I was in the same room as them. Like, we were all invited, and I'm on that playing field. And I was like, okay, this is like a real thing. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I should probably take this seriously, because those people were taking it seriously. And I was just kind of like fucking around. Because I just again, like I said, like I wanted just free things, and I wanted to go to cool parties. And I think in a way I never really thought it would happen. It was just kind of like there's a book that I was reading, and he mentioned something like this of like, thinking about your future and your goals, like to the point of insanity. And I'm completely butchering this and paraphrasing, but basically being like, yeah, like I was essentially being like, yeah, I am an influencer. Yeah, I am this, that, and the third. Having nothing to back me up, nothing to really substantiate it, but it just kind of happened.
I think a lot of times that's where people get caught, right? Is that they make up a lot of these arbitrary benchmarks, or these arbitrary requirements of, well, I'm not this yet because I haven't done A, B, C, D, or I'm not this yet because I've only been doing it for X amount of time, or whatever it might be. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught, is disqualifying themselves instead of really just kind of pursuing it, or doing what they want to do, or looking at it at the reality of like, yes, no, sure, you're young, but you've done way more than somebody twice your age, or you are actually an expert in this. Because I was just having a conversation the other day, and essentially it was differentiating between the time spent doing something of like your age, and the actual time spent on the craft, right? Just because somebody's been in an industry for longer than you, just because somebody is older than you, doesn't necessarily even mean that they've spent more time doing a certain thing than you. And like, even it kind of dawned on me, like, I'm 28 and I have 9 years of management experience, right? And it was, just because I'm young doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean that I haven't necessarily put the hours in. That's a good chunk of time, but maybe from the outside looking in, it's not what you would necessarily assume.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. Like, I think a lot of people, like you said, like they equate age with knowledge and wisdom, and that's not the case. Um, sure, like experience, life comes with its own experience, but there is when it comes to a craft, like you have to be working at it. Like,
Exactly.
there can be someone who is, a year older than me just starting out, and I'm like, they
Yeah.
still don't know anything, but like I've been doing this for 8 years. Like,
No, I love that. And, I think one thing I'd love for you to expand on a little bit too is maybe the side that people don't necessarily see about being a content creator, right? There's still, it has changed a lot, recently,
yeah.
but I think there's still a lot of people are like, oh, you take a picture and you post it and you get paid. And,
Mhm.
not looking at necessarily the work that goes into it and the behind the scenes work, the, maybe stress or, having to deal with the negative feedback, having to deal with, your life kind of being out there. And so I'd love for you to just expand on that a little bit of maybe some of the things that people either wrongly assume or they don't necessarily see that you've experienced.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's, God, where do I begin? Because I talk about this openly because I feel like it's important to discuss this, and I'm glad you asked. Because there is a portion of like the general public that doesn't understand that this is a real job, and that you know I have to come up with pitches. I have to be able to you know like present myself and present my ideas cohesively, um in accordance to like a brand guideline, and like there are actual like things we have to keep in alignment. Like there is a box painted for us, and we have to be creative within that box, more or less. um I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of advocating on my own behalf that I have to do. Like I don't take, and I hope that people understand this by now, but I don't take just arbitrary partnerships. And, I say no more often than I say yes, because I value what I bring to the table. I value my image, and I value my career and the things that I represent. And if it doesn't make sense for me, if it doesn't make sense to me, I can't expect my community to, support me, because they can sense these things. And like they'll speak in ways that they won't necessarily be like, oh, this sucks, but they'll say it in other ways, and like not engaging or being like, huh, interesting, and then scrolling past. Like, I think also people don't understand that um, there's a large portion of the work that I do that is not seen on social media. It's the work and the like contracted work that I do for brands. And that it's quite lucrative if you position yourself correctly, if you have the right vision, and have the drive to actually like create something using the resources that you have access to.
Mm.
And because it doesn't, I mean, now I have more equipment and can do more, but I look back and there are posts from like a year ago or 2 years ago that I've looked and I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. I love this. I can't believe I created this using like my super old Fujifilm in my tiny apartment bedroom. I literally had created like basically sets and stages in my bedroom, and was shooting it for brands and getting paid hundreds, thousands of dollars to do this. Like, so I'm like, you don't need like you don't need hundreds and thousands of dollars of equipment. Like I know there are so many content creators that I know that just shoot with their iPhone all the time. I don't understand how it happens, but because it would drive me insane. But yeah, they shoot on their iPhone and they edit on their iPhone. They send it to brands and they're paid thousands of dollars. Like,
Yeah.
it's about having like you have to have a point of view. You have to have some sort of, and I'm not saying that everyone does, because there are definitely people that just take selfies and, they get hundreds and thousands of likes. But I'm not considering myself in that category. Like I'm talking about like content creators who truly understand what they're doing and truly, want to create lasting relationships with brands because they feel like they have something to offer creatively.
For sure. And, I think it speaks to, there's no one way to do it, right? Whether, like there's no proper equipment, there's no proper way, there's no, you have like
Right.
the steps 1 through 17, like there's so many different ways to do everything, but especially be a content creator. And, finding your true voice, your own voice is just super important, your own way of doing it.
Yeah.
Now, switching up a little bit here, I'd love to go back and talk about, you said that you consider yourself a mental health advocate. And so I'd love to just hear a little bit about your own mental health journey and how that kind of came about. Like, what, both in your personal life, what started you on that? And then what was kind of the catalyst for you to start sharing with other people?
So the catalyst for my own personal mental health like experience journey was I was actually on a night out and I've not been feeling well, like emotionally well. And I during the course of the night, I had just what I call brownouts, where I just there were just gaps of my memory that were completely gone. And I had no I didn't and I apparently just at some point that I turned off, basically, I offended someone and like there was this whole thing. And I just did not remember the exchange at all. And that scared me. I was like, I don't like that idea of not having control of that environment or having like my words or actions misunderstood or in any way. So yeah, from there I realized I was like, okay, I probably should see a therapist. Like, these are symptoms of depression, and luckily, I had someone in my life who encouraged me to find a therapist and provided resources. So I did. But when I started to want to share on social media after one of my friends is a like really big content creator on Instagram, and they had added me to their close friends. And like I was going through their story, like looking at all the happy photos, and then in their close friends, like they were absolutely miserable. And I kind of I was just taken aback by that vast juxtaposition, that vast contrast between, posting all these things, making people believe that you have this beautiful, happy life when in reality you are absolutely miserable. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want that to be how I live my life. I don't want to be, because at the time, like I was just posting things, like everything was like fine and dandy. Um, but like I was really struggling. Um, and just after that, I started to really think about it like critically of like, the amount of men that are actually talking about mental health, and the amount of men of color talking about mental health. And it was not a lot at the time. So, and there's another part of it that I was like, I don't want people to come to my platform who feel the same way that I feel, look at my content and feel worse about their lives. Like, not saying that my life is, anything majestic or anything like that, but I wanted to be as real with the good things as well as the bad things as well as the good. So I started sharing, and look, like I was really surprised at the response, and now I've been given this platform and the space to really be impactful and talk more and like be what what I needed, be for me, be for other people what I needed someone to be for me. If I had seen someone on social media talking about mental health like before I got involved in all of this, like I would probably be in a different place. But that didn't happen. So now here I am, and I love getting to do this. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't feel arduous to talk about my story. And the more I talk about it, the easier it becomes,
Yeah.
and the less scary it becomes. And there are people I meet, like just like I think I was sorry, I'm like
No,
gonna go
that's
on
okay. Keep
just
going.
a little tangent. But I think I was talking to my barber for the first time, or it was someone, I can't remember, but I had just met them. And no, I was on set. I was at a modeling shoot and I was on set. The guy was walking me back and he was like, yeah, I don't really like, no. He was like, we were just like shooting the shit. And and I was like, do you want to talk about your trauma? And he was like, yeah, let's talk about our trauma. So we did.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was just so hilarious because I was just, joking around, but being fully prepared for him to, start talking about his trauma. And I was like, I think that's so cool that I could just, not think that it's a joke, but be able to bring some levity to something that we all experience. We just are so afraid to talk about.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
No,
my little thing.
no, I loved it. And I think it's such an important piece too, that it doesn't always necessarily have to be, this big, super intense cry session, super serious. Like there's a difference between, not taking it seriously and, like you said, bringing levity to it, bringing a lightness to it, opening that space and allowing them to choose if they want to step into it or not, or how much they want to step into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, what you said, I really love. The one piece is the more that you've shared the easier it's become. And I'm a huge believer in that. And, the way that I look at it, and I've talked about it a couple of times. And one of the reasons really I started the podcast in general was I look at it as taking power back from those demons, of instead of keeping them inside, instead of hiding them, instead of like worried that people might find out about them. Like, no, I'm going to go out, I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to do it publicly so that they don't hold the power over me anymore, and
Yeah.
whether, 2 people or 100 people or 1,000, it doesn't matter, however many people hear about it, even if nobody here like listens to it or catches it, I still feel like because I've put that out, it doesn't have the power on me. It makes it easier to talk about the next time. And, I don't have to live my life in fear. Now, going back a little bit again, because I also started my journey with a therapist, and I held a ton of shame around it. I've talked about it a couple times on here of how much shame I held around it, how nervous I was, like, and I didn't tell anybody for a couple of years when I first started, like not even my sister, who is the closest person to me. And I'm curious what your journey was like with that. Was there a lot of shame around it? Was it a difficult journey, or were you able to handle it fairly well? Or like, was your community accepting of you going and seeing a therapist?
Um, I I was really fortunate to not, enter an environment where I felt shame around seeing a therapist. In fact, one of my friends was super open with me about seeing a therapist. And I think by the time I actually took the steps to schedule a meeting, schedule a session, I think I was ready for it. Because I remember distinctly asking my parents to see a therapist. Like I had wanted to see a therapist. That ended up not working out. It's a long story, but I finally, I had always known, I was like, I should probably see a therapist, even joking around, I should probably see a therapist. But at that time, like I really just needed to talk to someone who wasn't going to judge me, who was bound by law to not talk about the things that I brought up in the session. I found a lot of security in that. And frankly, like if anyone had a problem with me seeing a therapist, like it's not my business and it's not my problem because it's not their life. Like if someone feels like me seeing a therapist is somehow like offensive to them, like then go elsewhere. Like I'm trying to better myself. Like I'm trying to show up for myself, and I'm trying to, make sure that I am equipped with the tools to function. Like if I feel like I need to, yell and scream at a therapist instead of yelling and screaming at people out on the street or people in my circle, then I'm gonna do that. And everyone will be grateful for it.
Like I'm a huge believer in, healing yourself allows us to heal others as well.
Yeah.
And another thing that I'm just really curious on your take, because I think that is a story we hear over and over and over again, is that people only showing the perfect idealized versions of themselves on social media. And whether you're you have a huge following, whether you have just a couple people, I still think that the same thing happens. People only want to show the good. They only want to show how perfect their life is. They don't want to talk about the bad or the negative. Where do you think that comes from? Like, as I've thought about it, I think sometimes external validation. Us, everybody at, I think to varying degrees, some looks for validation in different places. Do you think it's maybe, people not wanting to bring others down or feeling like, oh, I can't share negative things? Or is it almost a culture of it being taboo on social media? It's like, no, you don't show negative things here. Like this is where you show your highlight reel. I'm just curious if you've ever thought about that, where you think it comes from. And then just even why you think it's so important for people to be real and show all of those different sides.
I've thought a lot about where it comes from, and I don't fully have an answer to it, because I feel like it also will look different for different people, whether they were not brought up to, talk about those things, not talk about like negative things. And I know some of those people who are very much conflict avoidant in every single manner. Like they won't talk about like what's going on in their lives that are bad. Like they can be like super struggling all the time and, will present the like perfect face. But, I think it's very healing for people to see and to connect with others who are going through the same things that they are. Like I think in some ways that people still live in this binary that like if they start talking about all of these bad things that are happening in their lives, that they're going to bring people down or that they're always going to be there. And I'm like, no, life is a balance. Yes, like I could be struggling one day and then be like really peppy and happy all the time, and then be back to feeling morose. Like it's just part of life. And I think the more real that we become on social media, the less toxic it'll be, the more we'll develop some more empathy for everyone else. I think that overemphasizing the good doesn't leave a lot of room for empathy when you end up talking about bad things, because they're like, well, look at your life, like nothing bad has ever happened to you, like why are you whining about this, blah 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 blah. Not saying that's in every case, but that's kind of from what I witnessed, like that's a big part of it. Yeah, and I think also just again my own personal idea of uh, and I've lost my train of thought, but I feel like I've said it already.
Yeah. No, that's more than okay. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. I think it's very helpful. And yeah, I mean, just having honest conversations is just super important, and that's what I like to try to have. Hence the diving into the childhood right off the bat. And
I was like, oh, we're going there.
Now we are getting a little bit short on time, but this is kind of, I don't know, might be out of left field, but it is a question that I just feel like I want to ask you, because I think you might have a really interesting view on it. And
Okay.
it is this idea of, what would you say to somebody who either implicitly or explicitly asks or is looking for advice on how to step into themselves, how to show their true colors, how to show who they really are, and not necessarily a made up or romanticized version of themselves. Do you feel like you've always been able to be very authentic in yourself, or was it a bit of a journey for you? Where does your mind go when I ask that? Which again might be a little bit of a weird question, but I'm just curious.
I think so. I feel like one must figure out how to live with themselves before they can live authentically and on a platform and live it publicly. I think at least for me, I had to do the work for myself and really come to grips with not only the good things about myself, but the things that were bad about myself that I considered bad, that I considered needed work on, or just like quirks that I had that, are just there. Becoming aware of those things and becoming comfortable with them. Because like you said, like, the more that and like we were talking about before, like the more that we talk about these things, the easier they become. The more that we come to terms and come to grips with our light side and our dark side, and to be poetic about it. That's when that work will begin, and it once that process starts, and one continues to post online and do all these different things and live out their lives, you'll look back and see that you will just like automatically start just living your life, because you won't have to care and you won't have to seek all this external validation, because you can validate yourself. You've already validated yourself. And that's how I kind of external validation is great. I love it. I truly do. But if it disappeared tomorrow, yeah, I'd be sad and I'd really have to reconsider my career. But it's my worth is not tied to this. It's I am a awesome human being without social media. Like, I'm an awesome human being without the platform that I have and without the brand deals that I have. Like if that all disappeared, like I would still be okay with me. And that's truly because I had to figure out how to love myself, how to like really, and not just love myself, but like myself and like the things that I have. Yeah. And even like look at my flaws and be like, it's just life. It's just it. So sorry, I kind of went off, but I hope that answered your question.
No, that was amazing. And, I really do appreciate it. And it's very similar to my own, I believe I definitely had to look inward for that. And I think for most of my life, it was this idea that my actual self, my true self wasn't good enough. And so I can't show that to other people because it's not good enough. I've decided it's not good enough for me. How could it ever be good enough for other people? So I need to change that. I need to hide those flaws. Like something I've talked about a lot is this idea of perfection. The only way for me to be good enough is to be perfect. And so no flaws. I need to be who that person wants me to be. So I'll change my personality to be them. To be that person for them. It all just started inside of me. And it's funny how, as you work on that, it seems like that external validation gets quieter and quieter, and those external voices get quieter and quieter because you learn to listen to that voice inside of you. So
yeah, and I think also it's just like, it's not even that the external validation will go away, but like, and it won't hold as much weight.
Yes.
Like you won't like cry because someone didn't like your outfit, or like, because it's like, if you like it, that's all that really matters. I live in New York City. Like, I am not going to be the craziest person that they see today. And I think honestly being in New York really helped with like coming to terms with me, because I'm like, I'm not as weird as a lot of these people out here. So, and I can say that like with full confidence.
Sometimes those perspectives are super important and humbling, and yeah. Awesome. We are out of time here, but before I let you go, I'm curious, is there anything that we didn't get to that you'd like to talk about? Yeah, anything at all on that?
No, this has been really great. Like, what a cool conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I loved it. And if people want to get a hold of you, follow you, get in touch, where would the best place for them to do that be?
Yes, so I am on all the social media platforms at Steven Sharpe Jr. That's Steven with a V, Sharp with an E at the end, JR. And I also have my agency, Nobius Creative Studios. You can look me up there. And yeah, I'm pretty easily accessed if you try.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for this conversation, for joining me, for being vulnerable. I really enjoyed myself.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's just so much fun.